Değerli izleyiciler merhaba. Bugün özel bir sohbet, röportaj gerçekleştireceğim. Sayın James Jones'la Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nde çok saygın ve çok önemli bir isim. Hem Amerika Birleşik Devletleri yönetimine Barack Obama döneminde danışmanlık, Ulusal Güvenlik danışmanlığı vermiş bir isim. Aynı zamanda NATO'da, Avrupa'da çok önemli askeri görevlerde bulunmuş. Sonrasında da hem askeri konuları hem politik ve ekonomik süreçleri yakından takip eden bir isim. Bu Türkçe girişin ardından kendisiyle İngilizce bir sohbet gerçekleştiriyor olacağım. Sir, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
Welcome to Istanbul. Welcome to our country.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back. I have very high expectations that the bilateral relationship between Turkey and the United States will improve significantly in the next administration. I think that going back to the first Trump administration and his relations with Turkey were very positive, and they achieved quite a few things. Unfortunately, over the last 4 years, there have been some setbacks in the bilateral relationship, but I sense the enthusiasm both here in Turkey and in my discussions in Washington with the new Republican administration that not only won the popular vote but the Electoral College, but also has won the U.S. Senate and may be on the verge of winning the House of Representatives as well, which gives the new president almost a mandate, which hasn't been achieved in a long, long time.
I would like to ask additional questions about between USA and Turkey, but in second Trump administration term, how do you see the future of Ukraine and Russia conflict? What do you expect?
That's a very difficult question, and it's one that I think will face the Trump administration immediately after the inauguration, and we'll just have to wait and see who the Secretary of State is, who the Secretary of Defense is, who the National Security Advisor is. But to me, there's no question that that and the situation in the Middle East and the world economic situation are three of the things that the new administration is going to have to face very quickly.
What kind of policy towards China should we expect? Because China is one of the major players, and it's on the radar all the time for the U.S. administrations and for the U.S. government's policies. It's very important.
Yeah. It's a very important question. So my strategic answer to your question is that the world right now is engaged in a contest between autocracies and democracies. On the one hand, you have countries like Iran, China, Russia, North Korea, and several other countries in our own hemisphere in South America and on the African continent. And in those autocracies where you have people who are trying to hang on to dictatorships, they're watching very closely to see in the immediate instance what happens in Russia, Ukraine, what happens to Vladimir Putin. Is he restored as a legitimate leader? Is he welcomed in the international fora of discussion? Or is he treated as a war criminal? And so what happens there has global ramifications. And it's a very important, to me, it's a very important issue. I think it might even color the Chinese intentions with regard to Taiwan and other places like that. We now have North Korean troops reportedly coming to Russia and the Ukraine conflict. Those are very troubling developments. But I think again, at the strategic level, this contest between autocracies and democracies and how that works out is one that's going to affect our children and our grandchildren.
Do you see any risk of a military conflict between the United States and China soon in this dispute areas in Pacific Ocean? Yeah, mostly about, I'm talking about the Taiwan issue, Taiwan topic. Is there a high risk?
It's always a possibility. I don't see it as a probability, but it's a possibility. It would be a grave miscalculation if that were to happen. I think that we need to find a way to coexist with China, but to do so in a competitive way in the marketplace. And I think that we need to steer China towards accepting the level playing field that we need to have so that people can compete with each other without becoming enemies. But as long as China backs a country like Russia and what it's doing in the Ukraine, it gives you wonder as to what China's real intentions are in the longer term. I hope that it doesn't result in any type of conflict, but there's always a possibility there could be some minor skirmishes in the South China Sea, for example, as a result of miscalculation.
Turkey has traditionally good relations with the Western countries, including United States, and Turkey is a candidate member for full membership to the European Union. On the other hand, recently Turkey is seeking some cooperation in Asian countries like Russia, China, towards BRICS, communities. I don't know, did you follow this meetings and events? Recently there was a summit.
Yeah.
What do you think about it, and how could Turkey contribute if there is a breach between the two sides? Or do you see risk, or do you see this attempt, initiative as a positive way? What do you think about it?
So I think that by far the primary relationship has to be with democracies and Western philosophies and ideologies. I think that's in Turkey's long-term interest. The BRIC group has both nations that have and have-nots, and so it's not nearly as competitive as it would be with the West. I think we need to do everything we can to make sure that all NATO countries stay firmly in a NATO camp, both from a military security standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint, from an energy standpoint. That's where I think Turkey's best interests lie.
So there is a famous 100 billion trade target between the United States and Turkey, and previously Mr. Trump, the previous president, and the current president, the future president, let's say, were supporting this idea, and Mr. Erdogan as well. What steps should be taken first, and which areas should be prioritized, in your opinion, to reach this target? And do you see it's a realistic target, $100 billion between the two countries' trade balance?
I think if you have two presidents of two developed countries who are powerful and have natural resources and balanced trade philosophies, that is achievable. There have been over the past several years some bilateral issues with regard to things like the S-400 and the F-35. But I think the mood has changed in Washington, and I think here as well, that we want to get past the problems of the past so that we can get to the promise of the future. And that future economically, I think, is very bright. And one of the reasons I'm here is to be supportive of the American-Turkish Business Roundtable, which is a new organization, not designed to be competitive with anybody, but to add to the potential of this bright future between our two countries.
F-35 issue. So, how could Turkey's procurement of F-35 and re-entry as if possible, production partner in the program become possible Do you think it's possible?
Well, Turkey's investment is already huge in the F-35 program, and I think now that the political tensions have dissipated somewhat over the years, that from what I hear, both sides are willing to find accommodation that could lead to the resolution of the F-35 problem. From a personal standpoint, I hope that we can find that path, because I think it's very important that Turkey rejoin the F-35 program for its own interests, but also in the interests of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
What could be a reasonable solution to the S-400 issue, and Turkey might find acceptable? Do you have an idea? Because it's a complicated and complex issue.
Those are questions that are being discussed in the Biden administration. I doubt that they'll find a solution before the end of the administration, but I think you'll find that the Trump administration will embark on resolving those issues as quickly as possible.
Is there an intention to resolve the problem, and from the U.S. side? What do you think?
I think, as I said, I think the mood in Washington is to do more with Turkey, not less. Things like resurrecting the Turkish caucus on Capitol Hill are being discussed, and so I think the difficulties in the relationship that have existed for too long are, I think both sides want to see it resolved, and when you have two sides that are willing, anything is possible.
How do you see Tehran's position in, if you look at the recent developments in the Middle East? Do you see it as a threat, or
Iran?
Tehran government.
I think Iran is a huge threat. It's the most omnipresent threat that we face, and that's been testified to by people in our government and outside of government in Washington. Iran is the puppet master for Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and whenever I hear people talking about negotiating with Hamas or negotiating with Hezbollah or negotiating with the Houthis, you're, in my view, respectfully, the focus ought to be on the government of Iran, because they're the puppet masters in all of this, and I don't think they've shown any desire to change their political views and their long-term goals of destabilizing the region, making sure that the United States is kicked out of the region somehow, and that Israel disappears from the map.
Do you see any possibility of military conflict between the United States and Tehran directly in the region?
I think if I were in Tehran, I would be telling the Supreme Leader that there's a new sheriff in town, coming to town in January, and
you mean Mr. President Trump? The
President Trump, and I think I would be very careful about using military force against any of U.S. forces, but also against our friends and allies.
I ask this question because it's a very unstable geography, and they are all our neighbors.
Right.
As a Turkish citizen, if you look at the map, Syria is, in a not very good condition, and there are millions of refugees in Iraq, and we have a long borders with those countries. And if there would be another conflict, I'm talking about Tehran and with other countries, NATO countries, and mostly United States. And the Turkish public opinion also have fear about that. If there is another conflict,
I don't think the U.S. has. I would not recommend that the U.S. engage Iran with ground troops and have a land war. Mm-hmm. But I think that the superior technology that the U.S. has, and that Israel also has demonstrated being able to target specific leaders in the regime successfully should give them pause to think about what might happen if they really do provoke the United States. We have a very powerful military presence at sea. It's one that can reach anywhere in Iran. And I think they should be, I think the days when they could just dismiss the U.S. Words because they didn't believe they'd follow it up with action, I think those days are rapidly coming to a close.
Sir, I would like to ask a question about the cooperation between the United States and Turkey against terrorism and terrorist groups, but it's a complicated problem, especially defining the groups, which one is terrorist or which one is ally, because there are some different approaches. But there is a significant concern in Turkey that the allies, primarily the United States, are not supporting Turkey. Some people think that and the fight against terrorism are even seen as a standing groups like PKK and the YPG in the region. They are seen as allied or let's say partners in U.S. administration. And how could these differences be overcome in new term, in the second term of Mr. Trump? I should also mention, maybe you also know it, these developments are refueling anti-U.S. and anti-Western, the feelings and emotions, sentiment in Turkey and in the region as well. What would you like to say about that? I know there are differences of approaches, but how can we find a common ground to fight against terrorism? Because I think the violence is violence and the terrorism is terrorism. If the groups are using the guns and the missiles or other systems. What would you like to say about that?
It's a very tough question. I came to Turkey in 1991 and participated in Operation Provide Comfort in northern Iraq and southern Turkey. That's when I first started even learning about the PKK and Turkish sensitivities and the like, and I think it's something that has to be respected. I think the solution lies in some sort of negotiation at some point
between
with the groups. I mean, however you do this is really a very sensitive subject in the minds of Turkish citizens, and you're correct. I know that from my time at NATO, the public opinion about the U.S. was, and I read it in the newspapers, was that the U.S. was somehow an enemy of Turkey. A significant percentage of Turkish citizens
it was very high.
In 2006, when I was here, believed that. And
it was about maybe 70%.
It was very high.
70, even more.
Yeah, it was. I think it was. Did you say 70%?
Yeah, 70.
Yeah, it was up there. Yeah, that has bothered me for a long time, and so in my private life and professional life, I've always worked with Turkish ambassadors and Turkish organizations to say, we have to stop. We have to stop this. We have to educate our citizens, both in Turkey and in the U.S., that the bilateral relationship should be so strong that people, first of all, think of each other as friends, and then when we do that, then the possibility of sitting down and having frank discussions about the most sensitive issues that face our two countries are possible. But that statistic is one that has troubled me for a long time, and I think at this moment, and again, I'm not involved in the Trump administration or any politics, but my sense is, from Washington's standpoint, that there's a willingness now to move forward, deal with the issues that face us, but with a positive attitude that we're going to solve these so we can move forward. The agreement between President Trump and President Erdogan for the $100 billion trade is, to me, a very achievable and very worthwhile mission.
We already achieved maybe about nearly $40 billion,
right.
Even more,
right.
$40 billion. So there is a hope.
Yeah.
Huh? Don't you think
so that's better than it was, even through the difficult times. But I think I'm very optimistic about what could happen over the next year, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. So Turkey is among the countries most critical on Israeli policies, the Israeli government policies, let's say, in the region. On the other hand, it's a significant, Turkey it's a significant player and regional player in the region, in my opinion, in terms of to get peace and stability in the Middle East. If you look at the map, there are conflicts and wars everywhere, and Turkey as a NATO member could do maybe more. But on the other hand, Turkey is very critical on Israel's policies. How might these developments affect Turkish-US relations from this perspective?
Well, I think the important thing is, as we go forward, there has to be consistent dialogue. We have to develop teams in Washington and Ankara and Istanbul on all sorts of matters: energy, trade, national security, international security, NATO, EU membership for Turkey, which the U.S. has supported, for many, many years. I think if you can develop that kind of, pick up the telephone type of a dialogue, president to president when necessary, that you can overcome these things. But if you're not talking to each other, and you relegate it, in the worst case, to a third party to negotiate between the two countries, that's the worst situation. So I recently met with President Erdogan and his delegation during the UN General Assembly Week, as you know.
September.
We have 50 companies around the table, maybe more than that.
Yeah, more, 35.
How many?
American 35 companies.
Yeah. So there's a lot of gravitational pull towards this new direction, and that's what we're excited about.
How do lobbies and opinion leaders and decision makers, media and the civil society influence Turkey-US relations, and which areas should be prioritized, and what do you recommend, what do you suggest on this topic?
On globalism?
Lobbies, the groups.
How does the interest groups?
Interest groups, lobbies,
interest groups and lobbies influence
and the civil society and the business leaders, the decision makers.
Yeah. Well, I think that in the bilateral relationship there should be more dialogue and more visits to each other's countries, and when we come to visit, there's certain touchstones that you have to reach out to. It's not just a question of going to see the president, but it's going to see influential organizations like DEİK and TAİK, the media, like you,
members of the Congress maybe, and the House of Representatives,
and members
Senate.
of the Congress and the parliaments. And in Washington, it's the same thing. You don't come to Washington for one visit. You stop on Capitol Hill, visit a think tank,
different groups,
visit the media, and continue to work on this and accentuate the positive aspects, while discussing areas where you have disagreements. But that kind of rhythm becomes contagious, and it leads you towards a path of success.
How do you see the advancements of Turkish military industries and the defense industries?
Off the page. As I said, I've been a friend of Turkey since 1990, and now it's one of the few countries that has really progressed in its industrial development, particularly on national security issues. And it's a serious country that has to be listened to and respected, and whose opinions ought to be sought because of the enormous capability that you bring to that Turkey brings to the table to solve some of these problems that we've just been discussing.
I think it's also important if you really talk about if there is a competition between China and the United States, Turkey can play a very important role in terms of contributing in high technology and defense industries and other areas.
Sure.
As a NATO ally, and if you look at the map logistically, it's easier to. Do you also, if you also think that, if you agree with me, do you encourage the U.S. business people, the investors, to come to Turkey to invest more on this topic, on these subjects?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I'm here with 10 U.S. companies for the first expedition, if you will, with this American-Turkish Business Roundtable. 10 companies who come over here looking to see how they can make investments. And by the way, it's a two-way street. We want to bring Turkish companies to the U.S. to see how they can make investments also. So that's very exciting.
Do you also recommend them to come to state by state, not just the federal scale, federal level? I think it's also important because
several years ago we organized a visit to the middle of the country, 5 states, and we brought 15 Turkish companies, and the governors of those states rolled out the red carpet of welcome. They absolutely love the idea of hosting Turkish companies, and we plan on doing the same thing again.
And my final question, what about NATO, because you served in a very important role as a commander in NATO for many years for the United States as well. Currently, what is the biggest challenge NATO faces today? So, what do you think?
I think NATO deserves a lot of credit under the leadership of Secretary General Stoltenberg. The defense of Europe is now an established concept, thanks to Vladimir Putin and his war on Ukraine. The line is no longer East Germany, West Germany. The line is from the Baltics to the Adriatic and the Black Sea countries. And I think NATO's response to the Russian aggression in Ukraine has been very reasonable, but very firm and done in a way that tells Mr. Putin that this is a serious capability. We've expanded NATO by 2 members, as you know, Sweden and Finland. And, somewhere at the outcome of this conflict, Ukraine's membership to NATO, and how this might
do you think it's possible?
all be worked out. I don't think it's advisable, currently, but it's an issue that's on the table. And, at some point when the 2 belligerents decide that they've had enough fighting and nobody's winning, then you have to ask yourself, how much longer do you want to go on? And at some point in every conflict, there is a beginning and an end. And so this issue, I know, is near and dear to Vladimir Putin's heart, but the citizens of Ukraine deserve the democracy that they want and the ability to choose their own form of government and how they wish to live in the future. So it's a difficult situation, but very important, globally very important, not just regionally, globally very important, how this comes out.
The very final question, because you mentioned about the new military concept between Baltic, Scandinavia, and to the Adriatic. There are some, in Turkish public opinion, even in Turkish media, some journalists, including some journalists, believe that the recent deployment of the United States in Greece, in Alexandropolis, in Turkey we call it the Dağ region, is against Turkey, not against the other countries like Russia or other countries. Have you heard about this kind of things?
No, vaguely,
claims?
but my answer would be there is Turkish citizens should absolutely not think that the United States will ever do anything that is against Turkey's best interest. That is not in our DNA. We are friends of Turkey. We are friends with a lot of countries around the world, superpowers are like that. Turkey is a very important player, increasingly important in the region that they're concerned with. And frankly, because of its economic power and ability to do things quickly around the world, has a global role to play as well. That should be respected, it should be admired for what Turkey has achieved, and we should go forward together hand in hand.
Sir, thank you very much
for
your time and for my questions. You answered all of them. Değerli izleyiciler, ATBR İngilizce söylersek Türkçe olarak ATBR, American Turkish Business Roundtable adında bir kurum, önemli bir kurum. Sayın Jones da bu kurumun başkanı, chairman olarak görev yapıyor. Türkiye-Amerika Birleşik Devletleri ilişkileri, bölgedeki son gelişmeler, NATO ve diğer konuları kendisiyle konuştum. Bu yayını izlediğiniz için hepinize çok teşekkür ediyorum. Hoşça kalın.
Thank you very much. Thank you.